Welcome to Athletes and Entrepreneurs, the Alumni Journey. I'm Rob Finkelstein, founder and CEO of Alumni Direct. We've created a platform to help athletes and other alumni network and connect with each other and tap into various resources into career and finance and health. But more importantly, this podcast is all about athletes' transition out of sport. It's such a major issue today between financial literacy, mental health. And we interview former college and professional athletes, and we talk about their transition and their journey into successful business leadership and entrepreneurship. And the goal is to teach and inspire athletes if there is, in fact, life after sports. So excited today to have Leonardo Scheinkman. How you doing, Leonardo?
Hi, Rob. Nice meeting you. Hi, guys. Pleasure to be here.
Yeah, so Leo was a college soccer player at University of Massachusetts. He originally was a player over in Brazil, and he came here. When he graduated college, he got into the tech space, and he developed kind of what was a precursor of an ESPN type website where they did various content, streaming content in, pretty much surrounding the world of football or soccer, as we call it here in the U.S. And ultimately, he started a company called Triumph Sports Management, and then where they're basically sports agents. And now he's got a new endeavor. It's Triumph Sports Foundation, which is pretty exciting. He's going to talk about a little bit later. So, Leo, when you were growing up, talk about how sports shaped you leading up into college.
Soccer is life. The rest is just details, right? So growing up in Brazil, that was it. That was the dream, to be a professional soccer player, play every day. I had an opportunity to be born in Rio. Brazil is the country of football or soccer. All the other sports are kind of secondary. So going to stadiums every weekend, whatever, watching games on TV from all over the world, and trying, the dream was to become a professional player. I was, as I said, I was fortunate to play for the top club in Brazil, Flamengo, and futsal. In Brazil at that time, you play futsal until you're 12, 13 years old, and then you transition to play outside on a normal soccer 11v11 pitch. That's where kind of the secret of Brazilian football. All the top players played futsal until they are 12, 13 years old. And when I reached that age, my parents would not allow me to just focus on the sport. Of course, you have to study. So this is one of the reasons why we moved to the US, so I can do both, study and play, right? So I moved to Miami. I went to Pinecrest High School, which is a good school. And from there, I got a soccer scholarship to go to UMass.
Okay, great. So when you were at UMass, and I talk about this a lot with my guests, for the ones that are a little bit older, like ourselves, there probably wasn't as much education on transition out of sport. But did they talk about that at all? And not just like a one-day class or workshop, but preparing athletes, like once their playing days are over, there's a lot more to life. Did they do any kind of education there at UMass that when you were there?
No, but I was studying international business with a concentration in sports management. So okay. I did take sports marketing and sports management courses. UMass is a top program, so when you go to UMass, you already kind of know, look, at that time, I'm talking 1993 when I arrived there was no MLS, you're not going to be pro. The focus is going to school. Of course, if I can play 3-4 years of college ball is great, but the objective here is to study. And then after college, you can try to go pro in Brazil or in Europe. But, there are so many great things that you can do with the love of your sport and I always say that for you to be professional in whatever you do, you have to be fantastic. And it's very difficult. The competition, it doesn't matter. It's not just about talent anymore. I think we've heard these things from Tom Brady and so many other greats who have played all sorts of sports, And do you have what it takes to be a professional athlete? It's very complicated. It's very difficult. And I think, and I tell everyone, the sport is an avenue for you to get the best education you can get. And now with the foundation that we already have 85 kids. We are helping them. And of course, we'll help them to go to the best university that you can get and play the sport, continue playing. But to get that degree should be the number one focus, because you never know what can happen in life, sports life as well, right?
Yeah, and I think that's the case. There's definitely a need for more education. And to your point, I think some of the, unless you're like sometimes I'd maybe say like a Division 1 big program for like say football, maybe basketball. Most people don't go pro, and even if they do, it could be a short career. And there's definitely a need for more education. I remember I always kind of resonates with me. One of my previous guests talked about how he really wishes he would have had like a 6-week workshop or some type of mandatory class that taught what's next after sports. And when you're like you said with soccer, like me, I was a runner in high school and college. I wasn't going pro, so I was looking at my education, looking at the big picture. And unfortunately, some of these athletes that struggle kind of identify themselves as the sport or the athlete, not as the person that's got many years ahead of them. So let's talk about networking, connecting, and talk about the importance of doing, especially while you're still playing.
I think it's everything. Networking, like today, for example, I had a conversation with my daughter. She's in Brazil. She's 16 years old. She's training at a club over there. And I told her, look, arrive early, talk to people, be nice. You never know where these people are going to be someday, if they're going to be here. And then, a coach might be here one day, the next day he could be somewhere else, and they're going to remember about you. And they're going to say, hey, this, whatever, Noemi was super nice. She's committed. She's interested. She was always asking questions. Maybe it's somebody that I can trust, right? And I can bring it. So I would say not just in sports, but in everything you do, it's all about networking every day, the whole time. Everything that you do, life is like a boomerang, right? Whatever you do here, just come back and bite you right back in the butt. So it's the same thing in networking. You create relationships, and some of these relationships can go for life, and people will remember about you and create, opportunities that you wouldn't think that was going to happen at all, right? So you always have to cherish, and it's like a flower, right? You always need to put water in it. You always gotta keep talking to people and treating them well and drinking a cup of coffee, whatever that is. All these little moments is very important to the creation of your network, because you never know where somebody could land and they will think about you. And as I said, opportunities can come about.
Yeah, and I love that. It's such great advice. As our listeners, viewers out there, what Leo said, it's just so important. And like you said, you never know. And I really like what you said too about like with your daughter, still being in high school and just talking, educating her and talking to her about like, hey, you never know who you're going to meet. And I think it's so important. I was talking to a couple guys that one was a freshman, one was a sophomore in college, and they said they really wish they would have learned how to network even when they were younger, taking back to high school, because you never know who your teammates are, who their parents are, who your coaches might be. And the bottom line is, like you said, is just I like the boomerang effect too. You're right. It's all I always preach about: just pay it forward, be nice to people, help people, and hopefully it's gonna come back your way. Which that whole
And if there is a college student listening to this story, or even a high school student, if your teammate or roommate or someone that eventually goes to the next level, they can always push you.
yeah.
There's that guy who played there with me. He's very good. He's a team player, whatever the reason. And then opportunities can come, not just on the playing side, but as well as on the life after sports, right?
Right, 100%. So something that's interesting I've been talking a lot about too is kind of cross networking across sports, because I think what I find is a lot of times, especially maybe the football players hang with the football players and the baseball with baseball, basketball, especially when you get to that really high level. If you're talking, if they are fortunate to play professionally, it seems like unless you're at the top elite star level, then they might interact with each other. But I think it's a missed opportunity, because what I find is I bring this up a lot. I do a like a networking event for my podcast guests, which you'd be involved with. And what I do is I bring. It's kind of cool. Like each month, like there'll be maybe 10, 15 people on there, but all from different sports: soccer players, wrestlers, football players, Major League Baseball players, swimmers. But what's really cool is to see them all kind of come together and roll up their sleeves and use that affinity relationship that they have, that they all probably started playing sports at a young age. It's the practice, the perseverance, the leadership, everything that goes on the DNA of an athlete. It's really cool to see that. So give me your thoughts on just kind of that cross networking, even thinking back to when you were in college.
I can throw some numbers that I read. I can't exactly quote, but at least for women, I was reading the other day that 94% of C-suite executives who are women, they played college sports. you know.
Wow.
So it's very important, all those traits that you have mentioned that athletes have, right? The leadership, the hard work, the mentality, all those things you're going to transition to the real world. You can use it to be successful, right? Never give up, right? You never know what's going to happen until the last minute, right? So in many sports, you know, you have that attitude and you can bring it to the business world, right? And by doing so, by having these characteristics, it opens so many doors for you. And a lot of people want to be associated or together with people who have that mindset, you know. So take advantage of all the things that you are learning as an athlete, and that you will be able to use it and be a winner on the other side as well, right? And the part of the networking is the same thing. Like I've seen many athletes that they're not gonna say names or anything like that, right? But they have a big ego, right? I might be better than this guy than the other guy, right? So I don't want to talk to him because I make more money than him, you know, whatever. But you never know, right? So you gotta treat everybody nice. You have to treat everybody fairly. You don't need to be best friends, but at the same time, you know, if opportunities come to network, to meet, to get to know people, always be a nice person, interested in the trajectories of the other people as well, right? Because not everybody perhaps were fortunate as you were, right? Depending, you know, of who
Right.
the athlete is, the opportunities that exist, and the way that this person got there. Because there's not a manual, right? How to be a professional athlete. That doesn't exist, right? Or how to be a great teacher, or how to be a great businessman, you know? And you can learn so much from people's experiences.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So let's kind of switch gears a little bit and talk about alumni engagement. Obviously, it's important to us at Alumni Direct, but when you were at UMass, were they bringing back athletes not just for the you know the homecoming games and all, but more so to kind of work with the other younger athletes, kind of like mentoring? Did any of that go on when you were there?
Not as much. Yeah. But 1993 to 97 was a completely different world, right? There was no emails. It was just starting. The communications that we have today are much, much easier, makes it much easier. And I'm sure now they do, you know, because I've been to alumni games in the past. I've seen that they try to have events in Boston, in South Florida, the university as well, right? All over the
Right.
country and even outside of the country, not just for fundraising, but to get people connected to the school and let them know what they are doing. I've been to a couple of these events every year. So yeah, there are a lot of opportunities to connect back. I think it's very important because we with the experiences that we while playing and as well as outside, they can enrich the program. I think it's paramount to the success of the program if former athletes are involved.
Yeah, I agree, and it's mixed. I think some schools do a better job, obviously, than others, but I think it's important to see. Like, I was talking to one person; they were saying how at their school today they're bringing back the athletes, and what they're doing is it's not just about the sport itself, but just like an athlete coming back and maybe working. So, like for example, like for me being a runner, maybe mentoring a football player, or basketball player, because again,
Mhm.
as an alumni of that school and being a former athlete from the school, is just kind of giving back and doing that. And I think that's so important because whether you're an athlete or not an athlete, I mean, bottom line is that alumni engagement, I think, is you can really help both parties, whether it's specifically for them or other people that they might know.
Yeah, and I think people in our age they want to give back too, right? And make an impact. So we are available with the knowledge, right, that we acquired throughout our life, and we would like to help others, you know.
Yeah,
So
no,
it's important for people to come back and to have that common sense and ability to
yeah. So I don't know if you got a chance to watch or listen to any like of the other episodes. So if you haven't, then these questions will be come as a just a raw answer to what you have. Talk about if you were to go back in time, kind of back to the future. If you go back in time, what advice would you give to freshman Leo at UMass?
be patient. I
There
think
you
that
go.
was the biggest advice I could give to myself.
Yeah, and it's funny because I always say 10 words or less, and everybody's like, you start thinking like, how do we come up with 10 words? And then some of them are counting on their fingers. And all that was good. Be patient. I mean, that's you hit the under 10. That's important. So now let's fast
Yeah,
forward. What
because look,
advice?
you come in, you think you're a star, right?
Yeah,
And But in college, especially in soccer, right, you're playing a U19, and then you come, it's like the equivalent of U23, right? And it's such a big difference, you know. You need time to adjust for college life. You need time to adjust for the game itself, and you don't have time because as soon as you come in for preseason, you get a couple weeks, and then the season starts, and these people who are in front of you, they've been, you know, waiting for their chance as well for 2 or 3 years, right? Now with the transfer portal, everything is different, right?
Yeah.
There's no patience either, right? So you go into a good school, oh, you don't play, oh, I don't like the coach, I'm out. So in soccer, for example, there are over 2,000 athletes every year that go into the transfer portal because they're
Wow.
not happy, you know, because they didn't have the playing time, because coach maybe didn't look the right way at me, or, you know. So the stats and sometimes are not good. I think over 60% of athletes, only 60% of athletes, something like that, they get a chance to go to another school.
Right.
40% don't even get recruited. So if
Yeah.
you are in a situation that could be tough, well, work hard to make it better, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Of course, some situations you just can't change, but
Yeah.
others, you know, that's why I said being patient.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I would have never known that number. It's I think most people hear NIL and they think of the big deals that, you know, the very few get, and then also the whole transfer portal. And a lot of times, I mean, what for a big part you're hearing about, you know, all these football players and basketball players. Those are the main ones you typically hear about going through the transfer portal. But that's interesting. That many soccer players too. That's a big number.
Yeah, I think in every sport.
Yeah, I'm sure. I mean, it's you're right. It's I'm sure it happens in baseball. It happens in. I'm sure it happens in probably even track. You know, swimming. I mean, just people like you
And
said.
I think, you know, you see a lot of former coaches or coaches who were there for many, many years saying, I don't want to do this anymore.
Yeah,
Because you do, you know, you coach a certain way, you demand certain things from players, and the players could say, hey, I don't like your attitude. I don't like what you're demanding. I'm out.
yeah, yeah. No, that's bad. So let's fast forward to senior
Yeah.
Leo. What advice would you give to him? Ten
Well,
words or
I
less.
finished school in 3 years. That's why I said patience.
Okay, but we're good. So instead, I guess, well, you still would have been a senior anyway because you just finished fast.
Yeah.
So what advice? So just back to the patients. Any other advice?
No, start thinking what you're going to do afterwards, and
Yeah, that's
don't
good.
wait until you finish. Use that time in school to plan for the future.
Yeah, no, that's great. All right, let's talk. You know, we touched on a little bit, but I want to kind of get your thoughts on NIL, both the positives and negatives, and not a, you know, big getting real deep into it, but from your perspective, from a soccer perspective, from a an agent perspective, you know, why don't you provide some of your thoughts?
Well, I think it was necessary. And I can give you my example, and I'm sure my example is the same as yours. I was a starving student. You couldn't work, right?
Right.
So all you could do is play and study, and that's fine. That's what we were there for. At what cost, right? So I had to call my father or my mother every week. Dad, I need $50, $100 because I have no money to buy food, right? Or to go out or go to the movies with my friends, whatever. Because, you know, that was our reality, right? And then if we took any gifts or any money from anyone, then we get banned. I think there was a need to have a balance. And I think the last few years before the craziness started, there was, I think, an attempt to have a balance. At least some college programs had some stipends, you know, for football players, for basketball players, for soccer players or whatever, to have some cash money, you know, so they can do that. But again, in this country, football and basketball are huge. They generate a lot of revenues to the schools, and yeah, it makes sense for the kids to get a piece of that pie. Now, where is this gonna go? I hear basketball teams, Division 1 top schools, having a $50 million budget this coming season, and for football, 40 million. You know, so those are amazing numbers, right? I
Right.
mean, but what about the other sports? Do we get anything, right? So soccer, what is the budget for soccer, right? what's the budget for baseball or for softball
Yeah,
or
for
for
track and
track?
field,
Yeah,
swimming, everything. Yeah.
lacrosse, you know. So then,
What do you see as the what do you see?
well, the negative is that, you know, few will receive so much and it won't be spread out
Right.
and not everyone will participate. And of course, the top 50 schools, whatever, or 100 schools, they can find ways of helping, perhaps if they want to, all the athletes. But then the ones who can't, then they're going to have to adjust to the new system. And okay, maybe we will go Division 2 or we'll go Division 3, whatever, and not be able to compete on Division 1.
How, like, from a, because this is kind of your world with, agency and sponsorships and branding and all that. Is there more of a push now with soccer players getting NIL deals? And I'm kind of not necessarily related to what we're talking about with the school and the budgets, but more so about just getting like sponsorship deals. Are you seeing more of that now in soccer,
Well, the
high school or
soccer
college?
world in college is changing fast. Okay.
Okay.
We don't know what's going to happen. What I hear is that US soccer is getting involved. I also hear that we'll have a full year games. You know, it's not just the 3 months. So it'll be from August to May, you know, a real soccer season, not putting 20 games in a couple months, spreading that out, which is great. And with NIL and salaries, I mean, it just changed the whole landscape, you know,
Yeah.
because then it becomes like, it's not just a semi-pro league. Now it could become a series opportunities for athletes. Instead of you going to the B team from a MLS academy or team, right? So if you are 18, 19 years old, you are, I don't know, Inter Miami B team. I'd rather go to college, get that education, get paid the same amount of money in college than you get paid in a professional club. And then when you're 22, you're done, you come back, and then you continue your college career, your football, soccer career, you know. And
Okay.
then college also is able to get good, talented kids who
Right.
wouldn't otherwise, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Talk about your transition out of sports. So you played soccer your whole life. You're a football when you were playing as a youngster, and then going up through college. When that was over, and I'm sure you probably still play in a sense, but like when that ended, like how was your transition into the business world, so to speak?
Well, like, I don't know. I think everyone has a different experience when they go to college, right? My experience was it just opened my mind so much. Then I start having all these ideas of things that I could do. And it kind of like, oh, I need to do this now. Staying here in college is like a waste of time, you know, because I could be doing something, I don't know. But of course, and that's why I finished school in 3 years, you know, once I realized, look, I can finish this and then I can open my business. And because of the timing I needed to do now, remember the internet time, so you couldn't wait 1 or 2 years because if you don't come in earlier, you lose a chance, you know. So I decided to finish school as early as possible so I can open I created a soccer website, which was equivalent of a ESPN.com of soccer, Brazilian soccer. And I moved to Miami, and then I was able to raise $4 million from two companies. One was Media Pro, which is a big sports marketing company out of Barcelona, and the other one was Internet Incubator out of New York. So then we had an office in Rio and Sao Paulo and here in Miami. But then the market crashed in 2001, right? And then the investors decided to scale back, but the internet wasn't going to go away, right? So I continued. And then as Brazil won the World Cup in 2002, most of our athletes started moving to Europe. So I think at that time I thought, oh, it's necessary for me to be more in Europe than going to Brazil, because we have, you know, Brazilian people had another problem, which our idols are gone. Imagine all NBA players, all NFL players decide to move to Europe. What happened to your league? You're not
Yeah.
going to be able
Gone.
to watch those athletes here, you know? The good thing about the US is that everybody comes here to play the sport, right? In
Right.
soccer, it's the opposite. Everybody goes to Europe. The best players go to Europe to play the sport. And the best teams, more money is there. Unless we decide to create the Champions League of the Americas, and then we bring our players back and we don't have to sell them to European clubs. And that's, you know, that's something that I had to encounter, which was you always trying to figure out the next move, the next opportunity, because if you don't, you stay behind. And then I had to reinvent myself when I went to Europe, because a lot of the players, they didn't have anyone doing PR and marketing for them. And I couldn't have both the communication part, which was the website and the interviews and the news, and run the player's image at the same time, So I decided to do the other part, which kind of, in a way, I was living my dream as well with my athletes, because their success was my success, and I had the luxury and the fortune to have players in the top clubs in Europe. I've had through my career over 15 players in the Brazilian national team, 4 players in the Portuguese national team. So I had a very nice run for about 20 years.
Right, right. Well, that's great. And then, so you did that. When you're looking at, one of the things I always like to bring up too, and this is like some more advice back to the athletes, and especially the ones, would transition out of sport. Talk about like the skill set and you as a business owner looking at hiring athletes. Talk a little about that.
Well, in my case, I was fortunate enough to interview the athlete. Okay. So most people would say, oh, he's a great, I don't know, wide receiver or whatever, you should work with him. But if the mindset was not right, because the same amount of time that I'm going to be putting in building your image, in creating all your profile, you have to create a character, all that stuff. You want to be surrounded by good people who understand what you're trying to do and not sabotaging your time.
Right.
So I had the privilege that before I start working with someone, I would do an interview, see what are the goals and objectives of each player. I never wanted to have a huge agency. The most players at one time that I had was about 8, So the average was 5, 6. Some years we push a little bit more because of the objectives and the opportunities. And also in football, different than other American sports, is that if, for example, if there is a player at Barcelona and Manchester United wants that player, then they will pay fee to acquire that player, Depending on how you do their image, they can be worth something here, and 2 years or 3 years from now, the worth of this athlete is here, not just in terms of salaries, but in the transfer fee that they will get, And the agent gets money on the transfer fee, which you don't have here in the US. It's capped at 3% only, right? In soccer, depending on the deal, it can be at least 10%.
Okay.
So if a player has a market value of 30 million, the agent gets at least 3 million, So this is very important, to have players who, you have to be a very good scout, right? To find out who will be the next big player and how can you bring the player from point A to point B. And it's not just in the marketing sense, it's also on the pitch, things that the club will not do for you. And most of the clubs, they're not interested. And I think it's incredible in all sports, professional sports, that most of the clubs don't do interviews with the players. Okay, they just, I want this guy, I'm just going to get it. They don't know if this athlete was going to fit your
culture,
your mindset, what the coaches are thinking and everything else. And then at the same time, it's a business decision by the club. So sometimes you see a player who play great for one team, then he moves on to the next team and he cannot perform. Why can't he perform? Why can't he perform at the level that he was before? So I had to work with the players on that. So I was performing better, and I had to do kind of the job also from that the club wouldn't do. So I had to create this whole thing. It was very interesting. And then once you perform, then you can push on the PR and the marketing side. And then you create a character.
That makes sense. Let's talk about your foundation and what you're doing today and kind of your vision of that.
Well, 3 years ago, not quit, but I stopped traveling like crazy. I was traveling a lot, 20, 25 days of the month on the road. And then my family, we decided to stop. And then just do consulting services here, stay in Miami. And then one day my wife came up with the idea to create a foundation. And I'm like, okay, so how are we going to do this? I don't want to travel anymore. And she said, look, no, we can leverage the contacts you have, all the things that you did for professional athletes. You can help kids, I'm like, well, okay, very interesting. Then it took about 6 months to figure out how we're going to do that. In February of last year, I opened the foundation. After 1 year, we have 85 athletes, kids from 12 to 18 year olds already in the foundation. At this point, the way we do is I help through my contacts to find opportunities for the kids in order for them not to pay as much as it's happening. Youth sports in America is very expensive, and the higher you become, the better you become, the higher you go on the sport, the more elite you become, the more training you have to do, the more extra training, equipment, travel, and this becomes crazy. In football and soccer, my daughter is spending 25,000 a year for her to be here, just to train, and
Wow.
now she's in Brazil, and there, if she's just training, it doesn't cost anything. She's training for a proper club, and there's no cost. And if they like her, they'll give her a salary, Of course, she can't accept that, otherwise she can't go to college, right? But
Right.
overseas in Europe and South America, if you're a good athlete, you get paid, and in a
Right.
high school level, not the parents paying for everything.
Right.
And I
Right.
think that's a big difference here, that in the end, it's not about talent anymore. It's who can afford. So imagine you have a kid who is a 4 year student in high school and has to play club, whatever sport that is, and the parent is going to spend at least 100,000 in those 4 years. And the questions they have to ask is, am I betting on my kids? Because everybody wants to be a professional athlete. The top athletes, I'm saying, right? The parents are supporting whatever the cost is. And I think a lot of people take advantage of that. And the kids are not becoming what they were set out to be, and for many reasons. Anyway, so that's why we created the foundation. We have 14 people who are members of the board, who are advisors. We have 85 kids, and now the objective is to find a piece of land where we can build our training center, and there the kids will study and train for free.
Okay, that sounds great. Definitely exciting stuff. So, how can people find you?
Well, I am on LinkedIn, Leonardo Scheinkman. I am on Instagram, Leo Scheinkman. The website for the foundation is triumphsportsfoundation.com. On LinkedIn, I also have a page there, Triumph Sports Foundation. And on Instagram, also Triumph Sports Foundation.
Yeah, this is great. And you can find us at alumnidirect.com. And if you go to our YouTube channel is where you find the podcast, and we're across all the different networks, Spotify and Apple, and just really encourage athletes and people to watch and listen to these episodes. I think there's so much great advice that Leo provided today, and just other people as well, the former, other athletes that we had on. Is just, it's such a struggle with the transition of sport, and we really want to make an impact. I always say we want to impact at least one person. Obviously, we want to impact a lot more. So definitely encourage watch. But this has been great, Leo. We really appreciate it.
No, thank you. It's a pleasure, and hopefully I can come back soon.
Absolutely. Well,